Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
Sabah al-Khair, good morning dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Yousef, Ahmed al-Rimawi, Robert Martin and Nasser Meshni. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Australia's only radio program that is totally dedicated to the Palestinian cause in English language. I would like to welcome our listeners on the AM dial and those who will join us later on 3cr.org.au/podcasts. In today's episode, we will be talking about Jerusalem, Gaza, and Marwan Barghouti, the nomination from Desmond Tutu. So stay with us and enjoy the episode. Good morning, Robert and Nasser.
Morning, Yousef.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Ready for another great show?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, what do we have today?
We're going to speak about Gaza. We're also going to touch on your talk, a very successful talk a couple of nights ago in the city, and some other hot topics. Also, we need to touch on some great work by Archbishop Desmond Tutu.
Bravo. All right, so we'll start with maybe
the talk. And
the talk.
You know, look, I think one of the highlights of the talk, from my part, from my point of view, Yousef, was when we spoke about your personal stories and weaving those through with the facts of the de-Arabisation of Jerusalem, but also where the Wailing Wall is now, and that what the Moroccan quarter that was ethnically cleansed in the first instance, and then B, what was the bulldozing that moved in immediately post the Naksa.
In fact, Hayy al-Magharba was bulldozed 3 days after the occupation of Jerusalem, and it kind of told the world that Israel is going to start a policy of systematic ethnic cleansing. I mean, within 3 days, the bulldozers were there, and they actually kicked out hundreds of families from Hayy al-Magharba and never allowed them to return. And some of them are relatives of mine, so I know personal stories. I had the pleasure of talking to them over and over again and showing some of their sufferings on the lecture. So basically, it was the beginning of 5 decades of systematic ethnic cleansing of Jerusalem, which is inconsistent with the Israeli policy of colonizing Palestine. We know that ethnic cleansing of Palestine started in the 30s. So with Jerusalem, they have the policy of Jewish majority, because unlike West Bank, which was occupied in 1967, Jerusalem had its own laws and regulations. For example, not allowing the residents of Jerusalem the right to stay Jordanians, because the people of West Bank held their Jordanian passports, but the Palestinians in Jerusalem had to or were prevented from maintaining their Jordanian passports. Number 2, they were not even given the rights to the same rights that Arabs in proper Israel had, which is what they call citizenship rights. So they were somewhere in the middle between the people of West Bank and the Palestinians of Israel. And this fragile legal and administrative system, they made it so complicated to the extent that, you know, experts will find it difficult to tackle, and it will be difficult to sue them in international courts, because there will be so many loopholes that will make any court case go endless and perpetual. So the ethnic cleansing of Palestine and the Jewish majority of Jerusalem was one of the topics we spoke about 2 days ago.
Yeah, but where the ethnic cleanse was so clear in 1948, following de-Arabisation and the bulldozing of villages. The immediate bulldozing of this section of Jerusalem and all the people that it displaced. I mean, it was brutal. This is bulldozer,
bulldozing 700-year-old.
Yeah, moonscaping a platform to create, a piazza so that they could pray, but also as a tourist attraction. I mean, they take the soldiers down there and make them swear the oath and on their graduation to energize the soldiers and re-indoctrinate them to a militant form of Judaism through that Zionism. It's really quite sickening.
And what's beneath that touristic destination or a place of worship is hidden and stolen memories of thousands, of at least 1,000 years of continued presence of Palestinians. Continued. Mm-hmm. Today's families who are still not being uprooted from Jerusalem are the grandchildren of the ancestors of more than 1,000 years. People can trace back their lineage to at least 1,000 years. And when you bulldoze 700-year-old buildings and when you evict hundreds of Palestinians to just make room for a place of worship or a touristic destination, it tells you what kind of mentality is or how the occupation would have looked like from day one.
Well, how it manifests itself. I mean, and it's completely inconsistent with the concept of creating two states for two peoples, which is something they've espoused from word dot. And we get to the point where we are today, where a Knesset is filled with rabid Zionists and militaristic Zionists that call for the no establishment. They said that Palestine state exists. There is a Palestinian state. It's called Jordan. Go there.
While I was preparing for the lecture, I came by an interview with Benjamin Netanyahu on BBC in 1997. That's 20 years ago, and that's before ISIS and Qaeda. And when he was asked about Jerusalem, and he said, I quote, "If I had to choose between Jerusalem and peace, I would choose Jerusalem." So not just the Palestinian state, the whole concept of peace.
Man, this guy doesn't know peace. I mean, he would only say that because he wants a piece of something else. A piece of money, a piece of James Packer now as well, yeah? So, Yousef, I spoke about West Jerusalem before. Can you take us, because it's often misconstrued what is West and what is East Jerusalem, take us through Jerusalem before 1948.
Jerusalem before 48 were the old city and the neighboring villages. You're talking about 120 villages. You have around 30 villages to the west and the other 90 villages to the north, east, and south. Now, the 30 villages to the west is what is today called West Jerusalem. And the misconception is that the Jewish forces seized control of the Jewish part of Jerusalem and called it West Jerusalem is wrong, because this is in total disregard of the ownership of the Arab ownership, Christian and Muslim ownership of these 30 villages. And enough to mention Deir Yassin is where the brutal massacre took place in April 48. And without Deir Yassin, without the fear created, without the horror and the amplification of horror, the systematic amplification of horror, the state of Israel wouldn't have been born. And this is not my opinion. This is what the former president or prime minister of Israel, Menachem Begin, and former Irgun member, which was viewed by the British forces as a terrorist group, says. Menachem Begin says in his book, The Revolution, that had it not been for Deir Yassin, the state of Israel wouldn't have been born. And yes, he was right. The fear, the horror that was created because of that made room for, and also the later events of 48 made room for the creation of Israel. And therefore, West Jerusalem is an Arab territory, and it is Muslim and Christian territory. That's where Edward Said is from. Mm-hmm. That's where Afif Safi is from. That's where, more than 200,000 Palestinians are from. And therefore, the whole of Jerusalem is a Palestinian land, Christian and Muslim. So I guess we can speak for hours and hours about Jerusalem, and we will feel that we are still beginning. So we'll come back to the issue of Jerusalem as we cover it in future episodes. But now we will move to the siege of Gaza.
Well, the ongoing siege of Gaza, Yousef. And as you know, June 2007 is when the Gaza was locked down, air, land, sea by Israel. So we've completed 10 years. And, you know, one of the concepts that gets lost on people is the barbarity of what a siege is, because the reality of a siege, and we've got to go back to medieval times to start thinking of it, to create a picture for listeners' minds, is of having a castle and an invading force surrounding the castle, cutting the water supply so there's no water in there, not letting any food go in, hurling construction material, food, the catapults of the rocks going through, and forcing the inhabitants of the castle to either die from malnutrition or lack of food or thirst, or for them to surrender. And that's the concept of siege. Now, it doesn't have an equivalence, in modern times. We have the situation, the Warsaw ghettos in Nazi times. But here we are today, 10 years, 2 million people, 50% of those people are children under the age of 18, locked. The daily calorific intake is calculated and only that much food is brought in. I mean, it's crazy. 2 million people. We've got to know that Gaza is 365 square kilometres.
It's probably the most dense...
It is the most densely populated place on Earth. Gaza, 2 million people. Tasmania, 650,000 people. 520,000 people in Tasmania. So that would
be 25% of Gaza?
A quarter of Gaza. Gaza fits into Tasmania 190 times. So you get a population density of people per square kilometre in Tasmania of Tasmanians is 7.6 people per square kilometre, which is a kilometre by kilometre. So you couldn't even see these people. In Gaza, it's 5,500 people per square kilometre. Since 2007 to date, we've had 3 major military incursions. Aside from the brutality of decreased fishing zones for fishermen, aside from the brutality of not letting in construction materials, 3 times a first world army, nuclear-powered army, nuclear submarines, has sent in all the machines of war to rain terror down on these people.
Not to mention the 2006 summer rain operation.
2006, before the siege, yeah. So
which was as brutal.
Well,
as
you've got to love the
horrific,
names that these guys.
The romantic names.
Summer rain, cast lead, pillar of defense, protective edge. I mean, they're almost like album titles. You're waiting for Hot August Night. Like Neil Diamond.
And the safety for the Galilee, going to Lebanon and killing 20,000 people
in the same time. Yeah. And what doesn't ever get translated is, aside from the human casualty, thousands of people, and often 50% of them children, is the devastation to infrastructure, bombing the hospitals, bombing the mosques, bombing schools, bombing roads. The only power plant gets bombed 3 times each time. And we're going to talk about the lack of electricity in a moment. But the following protective edge, which finished in August of 2014, hundreds of thousands of people were left homeless because the homes were eradicated. I'm sure we've all seen footage of that drone flying over parts of Gaza. They've denied...
Especially the area of Jabalia.
Yeah, Jabalia, absolutely. They've not let the construction materials to go back in. So these people, aside from being Nakba refugees and Naqsa refugees, aside from living in Gaza, aside from living in a place where 95% of the water is undrinkable, because the water table has sunk below sea level, so saline.
And it's also worth mentioning that the majority of the population of Gaza are refugees. They are from 48 areas, particularly Jaffa and Majdal.
Well, and the wonderful thing, this is what I had an interaction, I was going to say confrontational, it was more confrontational, with an Israeli who said to me, no, but we've evacuated Gaza and we're not occupying it. I said, hold on, you evacuated. 8,000 settlers were moved. Ariel Sharon took the decision he's going to move these 8,000 settlers because the physical cost of looking after the 8,000 settlers amongst 1.5 or 1.6 million Palestinians just wasn't worth it. So what he said, come out of there, we'll lock that down, and we'll move you, back to Israel. Well, he moved them back to the West Bank.
To more settlers.
To more settlers. On top of which, each one of them got, on average, US $200,000 in hurt money. Yeah? And he said, we evacuated Gaza.
And they made sure that the whole world will see how difficult it was.
Painful. And they did the same thing in Sinai, post-77. Yeah. But, I said to him, you evacuated Gaza. It's not occupied anymore. He said, no. I said, I want you to use your mentality and think about this. And I'd like you and I to walk into a bank and evacuate that bank the way you evacuated Gaza and see if we can stay out of jail. You didn't evacuate anything. You created the world's biggest open-air prison. And you created a cauldron, and you just keep turning the heat up.
And it's not like they left Gaza and left them alone. They started a 10-year siege, and of course they did, like you said, three cycles of vicious hostilities, and the rest goes on.
It is still occupied. Under the Geneva Convention, Article 33, the Fourth Geneva Convention, it is a war crime what is going on there. And it's despicable that it's being allowed to perpetuate, and silence from the Western world. And the economy has, it's in a stage of what's called de-development. We have
the
negative growth. Yeah, we've got a situation where 42% of them, the Palestinians, are in a permanent state of poverty. Youth unemployment in 60%. 80% of the people rely on international food aid to get their minimum sustenance. Over 90% of the water is undrinkable, and with no working power station that is run by diesel fuel. 70% of the power is provided by Israel, and 30% is provided by the Egyptians. And at any stage, they can turn it off or not. And we're in a situation now where they are turning it off. And today, Gazans are getting less than 2 hours of satisfactory power a day. And what does that mean for a student? Yeah, it means for a student, the best case is she might be studying by candlelight. And hopefully that candle doesn't tip and set the house on fire, as we know has happened. It means that maybe they're using a generator, and the noise of a generator and the fumes of a generator, that's if they can afford the fuel to put in a generator to power the house.
Just for the listeners to understand, I was watching a video last week from Year 12 students about just normal Year 12 exams. And the feedback of the students was like, the mathematics exam was very hard, as if electricity problem is not enough. Because this is part of everything. You can't live in 2017 with 22 hours of your day without power.
I mean, it's sickening. Just contemplate not having 22 hours of power a day and what that would mean to you. And just as a final point on, giving us a background on Gaza, the United Nations has said that in 2020, Gaza is going to be uninhabitable.
Because of the water?
Because of the water, because of the land.
And the population.
The population, the lack of arable land to be able to grow, the fact that without power, the sewage falls straight into the Mediterranean Sea, that's poisoning the greatest source of protein that the Gazans have, which is fishing. The fact that the Israelis deny the Gazan fishermen the 10 and 20 nautical miles that they're supposed to be able to fish. So they're fishing in more shallow waters, 3 and 5 miles from shore. So the fish they catch are smaller. They're being impacted by the sewage that's getting pumped in there. It beggars belief.
And you know what's even worse than that? Before that, did you want to say something, Robert?
I just wanted to ask, what does that mean, uninhabitable in 2020? What does that mean for a human being? I mean, there's no work, there's no food. What's going to happen? What's going to happen to that population?
Mortality rate will be the highest. And people will just, if they survive death, they will be very sick. And then you will have the social problems. Crime rates will be higher. Drug addictions, of course, is on the rise. And of course, there will be other. Everything will go to the direction you don't want to see in a place like in a contained place like this.
It's sickening.
It's planned by Israel as well.
It is definitely orchestrated. What's even worse than this is not only they impose this brutal siege, but Israel is presenting itself as a human. But
beyond human, we're a victim. We're a victim. If it wasn't for Hamas, we would, everything would be okay.
It's even, and showing that we accept children from Gaza to be treated in our hospitals, and they make sure that, the media talks about that. And I heard, do you remember when we went to that forum?
Yeah.
In Melbourne, they saw, it was actually a video at the beginning of the forum discussion that, nevertheless, we treat them nicely. We are trying to do our humanitarian obligations despite of the terrorism of the Palestinian counterpart.
Nick, I wanted to ask both of you, it would be remiss of us not to mention the PA, Hamas and Fatah, who are all involved. I read different articles about how some of the fractions are being asked to cut the power or whether or not they're going to. Can one of you or both of you give our listeners something on that? And I know that we don't get political and we're not going to be biased or unbiased on any particular party, but is there an easy way that one of you can explain it?
There are two opinions here. There is the opinion that is circulated by Hamas media outlets blaming the Palestinian Authority and Mahmoud Abbas for using electricity as one of the bargaining power to achieve political agreement or disagreement with Hamas. And there is also the other opinion from the Palestinian Authority that, on the other hand, Hamas is misusing the generation and distribution of power in Gaza. So I guess our role here in Melbourne is, yes, we do acknowledge that there are internal issues. We do acknowledge that, at the end of the day, Palestinians, when you put them in pressurized vessel for so long period of time, you don't expect great results coming out from political parties. There will be more errors than good outcomes. There will be more opportunistic representation, and there will be more bargaining. Yeah, I know that this is a limitation, but I still think that the core problem lies on Israel.
100%, and we know that Israel's forcing the hand.
Yes,
it's actually forcing the hand, and the people.
But there are, of course, yes, and not to try to whitewash any Palestinian political party, but yes, this is an area of, I would say, misrepresentation. Because if we want to tackle that, every political party is responsible for the suffering, and I'm afraid that the people of Gaza they are fed up with what comes out from everybody, from Fatah, from Hamas, from PA, from
the lack of
Islamic
help from
Jihad,
the rest of the world as
and
well.
They feel that we don't really want to hear more explanations and more excuses, and we don't want to continue to play the blame throwing game, and because at the end it doesn't change anything on the ground. People will continue to suffer, and unemployment will be on the rise, death will be on the rise, and I don't know how long people of Gaza will be able to tolerate that. Personally, I feel very very saddened on a personal level. Of course, it's a collective suffering, but I feel that the people of Gaza, as if siege is not enough, as if the war is not enough, and the list goes on, they are being used in this political game. And they feel that they've been neglected by everybody, and they feel that they are hijacked by everybody, not just the Palestinian, but also the regional players. And now we know that the Gaza issue is part of the Saudi-Qatari rift. We know that the Gaza issue is part of the Iranian-Turkish issue. We know that the Gaza issue is part of the future plans of Egypt. And, and as we speak today, there are negotiations between the rivals, between Mohammed Dahalan, the Fatah member who was kicked out from Fatah 6 years ago, and Hamas. These two actually were the reason why we are here in a state of division, because of what happened from the period of 2000 to 2006. But nevertheless, they are together now agreeing on, how we can benefit from that. But unfortunately, they are the only ones who are going to benefit, not the people of Gaza. So I understand where the frustration of the people of Gaza. I know that 10 years after siege, they feel that everybody has let them down, including ourselves.
Well, let's not forget when the parties were united, that's when Israel chose to start bombing again because they couldn't have a unified people. So.
Absolutely. And I think, like Nasser started saying, the world needs to acknowledge the suffering of 2 million Palestinians. I mean, all Palestinians suffer somehow, whether they are in Jerusalem, in West Bank, in exile. But the suffering of the people of Gaza is really pressing.
There is no comparison in the world today to what is happening in Gaza today. There is no comparison. It's never been done to 2 million people this way, this systematically,
this long.
For this long. It has no parallels. And the fact that it's being able to be perpetuated is despicable. But just coming back a second, Yousef, the reality is the Palestinian people have been dudded by successive Palestinian leadership. In fact, there is a dearth of Palestinian leadership, because we should be doing much more for our people, whether it's the ones in Gaza or in East Jerusalem, or our 7 million refugees, or our Palestinians from Yarmouk, or in Sabra and Shatila, Bujul, Barajne. The Palestinians have been denied their rights because A, of a dearth of leadership, and B, the ongoing despicability of Zionism and of the State of Israel.
Yep. On this note, I think we will leave it on Gaza, but definitely Gaza will be on our future episodes. We have 2 minutes, Nasser, before we end the show, and I think we have one more item.
We have one more item. We're very excited to announce that the Nobel laureate Archbishop Desmond Tutu has decided to use his platform to nominate Marwan Barghouti for the Nobel Peace Prize for 2017, and he sent a letter out describing the jailed Barghouti as a symbol of the Palestinian people and their struggle for freedom, which constitutes a clear signal of support for the realization of the Palestinian people's inalienable rights, including the right to self-determination. So a big shout out to our friends in South Africa and the
That is excellent.
Fantastic.
That is excellent. And this is also in harmony with the Tunisian winners of Nobel Prize last year, I think 2 years ago, the quartet. They nominated Marwan Barghouti. So the nomination of Marwan Barghouti is happening in Tunis, in South Africa, in Belgium, and hopefully maybe Australia our parliament should also join that. Maybe. I'm not very optimistic, but at least we can start.
Well, I mean, we had the South Australian resolution only a week and a bit ago, so anything could happen,
Okay, I think with this we have come to the end of this week's episode. Thank you, Nasser and Robert.
Thanks, Yousef.
And next week, I think we will have. Do we have I would say, do we have something ready?
I think we might be talking about Jerusalem or Gaza or Palestine.
But by all means, I think one of the difficulty of talking about Palestine only half an hour a week, I want my listeners to understand that it is, yes, it's heartwarming that we do have this outlet to speak about Palestine in English to Australians, but it's not easy because the Palestinian issue deserves at least, I mean, I don't want to say 3 or 4 hours a week. It is...
we should do a show, Yousef. We should do a show disclaiming the myth that Israel's a democracy.
Absolutely.
There we go. There's a really good show. Listen in next week, ladies and gentlemen, so you can hear why it's not a democracy.
Excellent. And also I would like to thank our listeners for tuning in and for their support on Radiothon. Until we meet next Saturday, have a great time and salam.